Welcome, everyone. I'm Laura DeFranco, the CEO of Brave Healer Productions, where we have a mission to wake the world up to what is possible, one brave word at a time. And here today to help me with that mission are some of the most amazing authors of a new book that we have coming out, The Ancestors Within, Celebrate and Honor Your Sacred Origins. You guys, this is book 4 in lead author Amy Gillespie Dougherty's series, powerful series about ancestral healing. Oh my goodness, I can't believe we're at book 4. She's got a big ancestral summit coming up with all of our authors. I want to tell you about that. But I wanted to say just a big thank you to you, Amy, first, before I introduce you to the authors I have here today. Amy, you had a huge vision for this, and I love working with you, your authors, this topic. It's a game changer. It's a life changer for people. I know it was for me. Everything I learned about what's possible in terms of looking at the generations in front of me, behind me, realizing what's possible there in terms of healing ancient kinds of wounds. I can't wait to get into this conversation. And today I have Frank Byrum with me. He's a scientist, author, and mindful living coach. And Abbie Martin is the founder of intuitiveresources.com, where she provides tools to help you find your magic. And both of these authors wrote amazing chapters in the book. Abbie, let's start this party with you. Tell us about your chapter.
Thank you. I wanted to write my chapter from the perspective of not really knowing my ancestors, where my upbringing, I didn't know anybody and didn't have those old stories that were passed down. And so I wanted to write my chapter from the perspective of how do I understand who my ancestors are and how do I create a ritual to connect with them and feel connected without having all of that history.
I appreciate that you did that, because for somebody like me and probably a lot of our listeners, just dipping a toe into this subject, you might not really understand that you can even connect at all.
Exactly.
So what do you want to tell us about that? Like, what is possible with all of that?
Well, I'm trying to think of like the whole chapter in 10 words, right? You have the ability to tap in, and because I personally would get really intimidated. You go see these amazing intuitive people, and when I first started, they're like, oh, this past life, and then you have this, and I'd be like, like, and I also had those feelings of, how do I know that is real? Like I started to feel like some of that could be made up. And so what I really, if you want to boil my chapter down, it's starting to look at the patterns in your life, and you see, your patterns, your lessons in life, they're the same as your ancestors, because that's what you all came here for. Like if you really look at all of that. So looking at your patterns and looking at all of the lessons that you have to learn, so that you have been learning, you can see or you can imply, I guess I would say, that that's what your ancestors have been going through.
I think that's actually one of the most powerful things that I started to do was think about who those people were and what those patterns were that were showing up in my life. And I could just, if you're on the walk of awareness, you could pause and be like, oh, there it is, right? You have to remember to pause and understand and be aware of like what that pattern is. But that's very powerful. So why is it powerful, in your opinion, to know the pattern?
Yeah, well, I think that's a multifaceted question, because it's powerful in a ton of different ways, just in your life, I think that's being more intentional instead of just floating along going, like, I think if you can look at your life and go, what are my patterns? Like, and that's part of what I do in coaching. I'll be like, wait a minute. You told me a story from like 6 years ago. I was like, do you see they're the same patterns? So I think when you can do that, you can be more intentional with your healing and your growth, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I love this topic so much. Okay, you guys, stay tuned for more from Abbie in just a minute. Let's hear about Frank's chapter now.
Well, My sense is that spiritual journey, we kind of grow up in a culture and an idea, and we get either our religion or our culture or society or family, and there's a point in which it's theirs. And there's an old biblical idea that talks about the gods of our fathers. There's a sense that it's someone else's and not yours. And life is sort of like making it yours and making decisions that, hey, this is me. And maybe I agree, maybe I don't agree, maybe it worked or didn't work for me. But there is a point in which the goal is to make it work. And I think it takes a lifetime sometimes to let go of the things that don't work, to let go of maybe your parents' views of the world or what they believe for you in the world, and then ultimately say, no, this is my journey. And I think once you can say it's my journey, yeah, absolutely. Agree with Abbie. We have these sort of things that we repeat over and over again, but sometimes I'm repeating them because they were things that my parents struggled with or things that I was, dealing with from childhood. And when I started to heal, I started to realize, no, this is my journey. And healing is about my journey, not theirs. And so the idea here is very simple. At some level, I have to honor their journey, where they are, what they brought to our family as our ancestors. And then by doing so, I get to honor my journey and accept my journey and realize it's different. It's not them, it's not theirs. And there's some great healing in being okay with them so you can be okay with yourself at some level. And that's really what this was about. And I think the subtitle of mine is The Prodigal's Journey to Spiritual Freedom. I think the prodigal side of that was this idea is very simple. And that is I was trying to do their journey, what they wanted from me. And I was just resisting that all along. And I came to the realization that I had to do my journey. And when I was able to do that, and actually it helped other people see that, hey, look, you're on your own journey. It's not theirs. It's not your community. I mean, it may bring you back there. You may come to some of that, but the reality is you got to own it. And once I started owning it, it started being more me and more authentic and more what I wanted to live. And I think every day is, inching closer to that more authentic journey for me. And that's really been my goal and my goal in teaching people.
I want to talk about that just a little bit more in terms of, I've landed in that place where I am feeling like I'm living a little bit more of that authentic journey. How do I know, Frank, what's happening inside of me what do I feel that I know that I'm doing that?
That's a great question. I think the thing that I had finally decided was, that intuition, that gut feeling, that momentary resistance, that little buzz that doesn't feel right, the butterflies in the stomach, all those things that come along, those are indicators that, hey, something's not right. I mean, the body knows, certainly, the intuition knows. And I think you'll see over time as those feelings change to something like, I want to embrace, this is the path. It's the whisper that says, yes, this is the way. Understand the way might be a season. It may very well might be breaking something that needs to be broken. So it might not always be beautifully comfortable and butterflies and rainbows and all that kind of stuff, but it will lead to where you want to go. And one of the things I've started doing, my previous chapter was about intuition. One of the things that I really pay a lot of attention to is resistance. Just that initial feeling that, oh no, I don't really want to do this. And we all go through this great deal. I even see it sometimes with an email or a news article or whatnot. I can even feel it before I even almost read it. That just feeling of resistance. And I go with it. I mean, if I'm resisting it that hard, there's a good reason for that. And I think some of those are ancestral patterns we're trying to break. But I think sometimes it's us going, no, this is not our path. And you can't jump off the path, right? It's not a train you can jump off of. Sometimes you can, you gotta maybe you have to change jobs or maybe relationships or maybe put up a boundary. Those things may take time, but listening to those resistance are absolutely steps in the right direction.
Okay, this is really a perfect way to kind of move into this next question I have for both of you. And Frank, I'm going to stick with you to answer this one first. So for many of us, when we think about where we came from in terms of our ancestors, we don't really have a positive feeling. But this book is about celebrating and honoring those sacred origins, right? That's our subtitle. So when we flip the switch and we look at where we came from in terms of celebration, we kind of changed the game a bit there. Would you share how you think about that?
Yeah, I came from a very conservative, very Bible Belt type a view of the world, and I wouldn't say it was a bad view, but it was a very narrow view in some ways, in a sense that it didn't quite fit what I was experiencing in life, and it was a really difficult thing to let go of. I'm a scientist by profession, and so that was a bit of a rub against the two ideas. And yet, maybe I would say today I'm more of a mystic. I actually do believe that there is something higher, and that doesn't always go with the science bent of what's going on. And and at some level, I was feeling that resistance that I was talking about earlier. Be it in church or among other groups or friends or family and whatnot. Something just wasn't quite right. And some people felt, really joyous. It was clear that something was working for them, but it just wasn't working for me. And I think at some point I had to go, okay, it's okay if it works for them. It's even okay if they're struggling through it, or even if they're, saying the rhetoric, because that might be where they are on their journey. And they'll sort it out. I got to believe that, if there's a higher spirit, if there's a God, it all gets sorted out sooner or later. Might be hard, but it gets there. And I think for me was the biggest ultimate hurdle for me in the end was trying to resist it just because it was them. And when I started to see the beauty of my parents and how they lived and how they learned to live their lives and how it worked for them, and let go of it, have their stuff having to work for me, and some things I kept, some things I didn't, some things I expanded on, some things I still believe, but it's my journey. And once I was okay to do that, oddly enough, I was able to let go of some toxic relationships. I was able to have some new relationships. Married to a wonderful woman who we have a beautiful spiritual relationship together. These things can all blossom, but I don't think I could have done any of that had I not faced my ancestors, said, okay, this is where they are, and this is where I am. And just being honest, man, expedite the truth, no matter what you do. And that ultimately gets you there, right?
Yes.
So
I love that. Expedite the truth. Okay, so Abbie, what do you want to add to this? You had talked about the patterns, and earlier I was thinking, yeah, some of those bad patterns, right? But we're celebrating these
Mhm.
origins. So how do you think of this?
So a big part of my process and going through this and working with the ancestors, I think, and particularly when I'm working with people, we focus on the negative patterns, right? Like, the persecution energy and all of these horrible things. And when my mom was in her, passing on process, she was studying heavily in the Course of Miracles. And so that piece there, it took me a while, because at first I was not, I'm like, I was like, whatever, Mom. But now I look at that and I'm like, it doesn't matter which generation. It doesn't matter if it's like from the cave times or from, ancient that we know nothing about. There's always good and there's always bad. And anything you study with the law of attraction, right? What you focus on is what will expand. And so I love the concept of this book, because it was like, well, let's focus on the positive piece of it. It is there, yeah, our ancestors have gone through some horrible things, and so have we, right? And we get to focus on some of the more amazing pieces, the lessons that we get to learn from them, the feeling connected, and I think that's what I would say, that connection piece has brought me peace.
Yeah, I love that you brought this into a little bit of a law of attraction chat too, because it's important. And with the awareness, we get the choice. And so when we're looking at that situation, it's up to us what to focus on. And the
Yeah.
focus is the magic there. And we bring
Yeah.
more of that into our literal body and into our lives, and able to radiate that out to other people. So that that topic turns me on alone.
Yeah. And then we're shifting it for the families that, that are, ancestors that are, in front of us.
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
If I might add,
Please.
awareness is the key. right? If you're ever going to make a change, I mean, we focus so easy. I did this for too many years. You focus on the change, all these things I want to do and whatnot, and realize that the earlier I can be aware, that's where the decision point is. The decision point is in awareness. And if I can be aware of an old habit, or if I can be aware of where I am, if I can be aware of how I feel, I can make a different decision at that point. But if I go through life unaware, sort of in a cloud or just rushing along or in fear or freeze, the old fear, freeze, or those types of things, or run, I'm going to run, or I'm going to be afraid. I'm going to do that. I'm not even aware of what's going on. But if I can be aware that I'm ready to run, I can make a choice at that moment. And that awareness is so strong. It is really the key. Everything else will follow if you can get to that awareness, if you can get to your awareness state.
All right, this is my favorite topic ever, right, Frank? So we're going to stay here for a minute, and it's actually one of the questions. So I'm going to let you keep going on this and give our listeners a little idea, right, of some ideas of how they can practice. So feeling is healing to me. Feeling is an awareness practice. Awareness is everything, like you have been saying. So helping people feel is part of this whole thing for me, no matter what book we're talking about, no matter what topic we're on. So I'd love for you both to share, but Frank first, what's that practice of awareness look like in your personal day-to-day? Give us an example.
Well, I'll go back to what you just said. I mean, feeling. Okay, I think the first thing I started to notice is that I wasn't feeling, and that I was resisting the emotion that came. And I did that for decades. I didn't want to feel the emotions. I didn't want to feel the frustration or the anger or the sadness or anything. And it was a hard transition to start saying and be honest and expedite the truth. Yes, I'm feeling this. Okay. And then asking the second question, why? What's underneath that feeling? Yeah, it's this moment. And it might not be this particular situation, oddly enough. It may be chained to other unresolved feelings. It's just being brought back up. And at some point, I had to stop. And this is where that sort of mindful practice comes in, is that when I have that feeling, that resistance, stop and take a breath, brings me back to a center, brings me back to a second. And sometimes it's just a second to say, yes, I'm anxious. Why? Mostly I'm safe. Mostly, it's really, it's something else than really what we think it is in the moment. And when I can take that moment and breathe. And so for me, it starts with something very, very simple. Is that awareness, right? That feeling, that uncomfortable, whatever it is, and a breath. And if
I
I
love
can
that.
breathe once, I can breathe 2 or 3 or 4 times. And if I can get a few breaths in, I can say, okay, what's going on here? And that's the moment where I can make a different decision, right? It just gives me that moment to switch out of, where I am, take a couple of thoughts and say, okay, what's going on here? And then, pushing deep into intuition. Okay, really, what is this right here? And I can navigate myself out of those situations. I will be honest with the listeners. Look, for years I ran in place. You wouldn't see it on the outside, right? I was frustrated. I mean, I was really good at holding those emotions down and pushing them down and looking okay and navigating the world. But inside, I was just a mess. I'm tired of it. And I think at some point when I got tired of it, I started to want to change. And then I started to be aware. And all that, came gradually. But once it started, it came quickly. I really
Wow.
wanted it more and more. And when you realize the results, you don't resist the feelings anymore, because you realize on the other side of that is something good and something wonderful and something beautiful. And that's really what you want. You want to get there quickly. So absolutely. I'm 100% with you.
Well, okay. So Frank did a really great job, giving us an example. Abbie, what's the awareness practice in your day-to-day look like? Give us an example of yours.
Sure. And I love this question because I think it's a universal issue. And for me and my family, you know, what I noticed is that as soon as the big feelings would come up, there was only two options: rage, you know, and just to be inappropriate, or to shut it down, right? Like my mom literally would turn and I would see her shoving Twinkies in her mouth, like, you know, and I'd be like, Mom, and she'd be like, what? Like it was just this unconscious way. And then I saw it in her siblings. The minute that something got uncomfortable, they would shut down. And so I had to work on breaking that. And so my favorite way to do that is because sometimes you can't in that moment. And you know, I think it takes practice and your intention. But my favorite thing to do, I literally walk into the bathroom and I look in the mirror and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I know that this is a big feeling. I got you. And I'll come back. Like, and that's just what I do. And I'm like, somehow I'm like, I want to cultivate a relationship with my higher self and promise to do the work. Go write it down. Cause in that moment, I don't want to write a letter and go burn it and be like, you know what I mean? Like in the moment, I'm like, I'm all over the place. So it's taking the breath, but you know, looking at myself and being like, I got you. Like, we're going to get through this.
I love the way both of you just described your process, because of course we need all of the ways, and these books are like that, right?
Yeah.
We get to offer you all of the different stories and all of the different strategies. These are all nuggets of awareness in this book, and you're going to get real tools and practices and strategies for you know, celebrating and honoring your ancestors, which is awesome, but they're all awareness tools. And I thank you both for not just for saying yes to this book, but for stepping up in the ways that you did. You are telling real, vulnerable stories. We get to know you in your chapter. So thank you for that. And then you're stepping up as a master teacher. You have both spent a lot of time understanding this, studying it, and then helping people with their journey. And so again, just a thank you to both of you for just doing that so brilliantly in the words of the book, right? These books are such big gifts, in my opinion. Abbie, I want to stay with you for a minute on this next question. So the Ancestors Within book series covers so many different aspects of ancestral healing as the big topic here. The biggest thing for me was understanding that there was healing to be done, like the possibility of it, even though some of those people in my life had passed away already.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, now again, just helping our listeners out. Why is it important to understand that and the possibility we have there?
I would answer that in two ways, Laura, because the first is the connection with our ancestors, with our family and our lineage, right? We look at those things. Those are extremely powerful. And I think that's the human condition. We want to feel connected. We want to feel like we're part of something. And so the second way that I am I'm a proponent of really shifting your belief is saying it's not so much just my ancestors. It's the collective are your ancestors. And so all of the work that you do for your little, you know, piece of the universe actually ripples out to the entire collective.
That's a great reminder. I always love to play in the sandbox with people who take responsibility for that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I am a lucky gal to be in this Zoom with the two of you today, and the way that you talk about this and take responsibility for that healing. Thank you, Abbie.
Yeah.
What do you want to add, Frank, to that? You know, a lot of people just learning about this topic, they have no idea that there's a way to heal those wounds that were passed through, that existed then. Those people are long gone. So why am I focusing on that? Why is it important to know about this?
Well, I think ultimately, you know, as for me personally, just not looking outside of myself, but for me, it was just important to heal from childhood. It was just critical to moving forward because I was repeating stuff that was just unpleasant. And there was a point in which I'm like, I could see the cycles. I call them loops, right? It's like every decade I'm like in the same thing, and they're smaller loops, and they're just annoying because you get there and you go, oh, I can't believe I'm here again. And they all, it's like a new highway. It looks different, beautiful scenery, and all of a sudden you're like, oh no, it's again. And I just had to get past it at some point. And that's when I really started to try to heal, not just in my life, but to look at my family situations, my ancestor situations. And then a different awareness came that was really subtle. And that is to realize that the person across from me is also doing the same thing. And a lot of what I'm seeing from them, those when their behavior really seems odd or doesn't seem appropriate or whatnot, guess what? They're still struggling with their ancestral beliefs. They're still struggling with their childhood. And that brought another level of empathy and love, I think, at some level. That doesn't mean it doesn't need to be a boundary there. Absolutely. Plenty of times there does need to be boundaries. But it also gave me a different perspective of what other people may be going through. And I think one of the things a book like this really does for me is to say, hey, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person feeling these things. I'm not the only person struggling with these things. I'm in good company. And there is something to be said to, hey, we all go through this at some level. And some people, honestly, in your life will just say, I'm not going to do it. And you know what? That's their choice. It's okay. You can put a boundary there. You can love them at a distance. And some people are gonna really embrace it and just be okay with that. And ultimately being okay with my parents and my past and whatnot allowed me not just to be okay with me, but others around me as well. And again, a different quality of life. If that's what you're looking for, that's what these things will get you to. And that's what I'm looking for. And each chapter, I think, gives you a different tool. Not one tool works for everybody, and not one tool works all the time. It's like any toolbox. You got to have a bunch of stuff in there. And everybody will figure out what works for them. And that's sort of what I try to do in my helping people. Is just say, hey, here's some tools. Let's figure out which one works for you. And and then let people go out and be their own carpenter or their own artist with starting set of tools, and then they'll go acquire their own. And that's really what I think this whole series of books does for us, is let us, embrace so many possible tools.
Yes, thank you for that. And you just reminded me of something, and I want to just repeat what you said. Not every tool is for everybody, and not every tool works every time. That was a little light bulb for me to remind people. You may have a tool that you've used for a really long time, and it may have been working for a long time. And all of a sudden you realize, you're doing it again and you're doing it again and you're realizing, wow, it's not working. Why is it? Okay. That's Frank said it earlier, just pause, take a breath, practice the awareness around this, and like, okay, maybe this needs to shift. Maybe I need to try something new today, or this week, or this month, or this year. Maybe there's a message here for me. And I love that. I love that part of awareness. My personal practice looks like that a lot. It has to do with the feeling, and it's usually my heart, my chest of a trigger. And I've gotten to know myself, and that's part of awareness. Like, oh, there it is again, that old thing, that habitual thing. Why is that back? There it is. Well, it's a gift. That's a gift to feel that. And because a lot of us have been taught and conditioned to not feel, we're a bit numb. We don't have that skill up in us very well. Maybe later in adulthood, we've been practicing the opposite, right?
Yep.
Shove it down.
Feelings are a gift. And one of the things that I would encourage people to understand is that feelings are information. They are telling you something. And if you can get quiet for just a minute, even later, and say to yourself, put your hand on your heart and say, what do you got to tell me? That feeling will tell you something about yourself or where you are or why you're uncomfortable. And if you can get uncomfortable with that feeling and get really curious about it, oh my gracious, you can make some headway. And it's just that simple, and it's also that hard. And I would encourage people to get really curious. get really curious about your feelings and why you're having them. It's not often the exact minute of what you're in. It's again chained to many, many minutes, many, many smaller situations probably. But once you get curious, you go, oh, I see that loop. I see that pattern. Ooh, I understand where that came from. And you can really trace it back almost all the way to childhood. I got some I can trace back to 4 or 5 years old. Same feeling, just looping.
Yeah.
It's key to healing.
Yes. All right. Abbie, close us out today. What do you want to add in these last 2 cents about this topic we're on?
I felt like my head was on a swivel.
I know, I've been doing a lot of nodding.
I feel like that is the perfect way, especially with this book series, as people are reading it, that, you know, not every tool will they want to try, but to also tap into, if they're like, when I'm looking at resistance, I feel like there's 2 types. It's the one that's like, oh, this might really help me and change me, I'm not going to do it. Or it could be, I'm really not aligned with this. And so learning the difference.
Yes.
And so being able to go through, look at them, and then it's okay, you know, if you're like, I don't want to try Abbie's ritual, you know, maybe that's something that you can come back to. So just staying open with all of the tools and not getting caught up if like one needs to be the way. Because I think, you know, you kind of said this too, Frank, I think your evolution through your journey changes. And so what a tool that didn't work so much in the beginning turns out, you're like, oh my God. And I had that happen. I'm like, 4 teachers ago taught me that. Why haven't I been doing that? And that's okay, because it wasn't time. So
yeah, that's beautiful. That's it. Oh man, you too. I love this conversation today. Y'all are hitting on ninja moves of awareness. Seriously. Like this takes people to another level. That discernment that both of you have been talking about today is an other level move in the awareness game, and that's life changing. Thank you both so much for what you do in the world, and thanks for being here today to share it with everyone. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us, and thank you, Amy, for letting us participate in this wonderful book series.
All right, you guys. So I know this conversation made you curious. Maybe something is just resonating with you, something that Abbie or Frank said. So come on down into the show notes. I have them hooked up with their websites, and they're very generously there for you to answer a question and there for support. And in fact, Amy has set up a Ancestors Within community on Facebook. Like, where do you ever get to read a book, but then go somewhere to rub elbows with our author experts and ask them questions and take the conversation further, right? That's going to be your journey, your evolution. So come explore. I have all of the links down below, and please join us for our live stream book launch party to celebrate the ancestors within, celebrate and honor your sacred origins. I'm going to have all of the authors there on September 16th, and that's noon Eastern on the Brave Healer Productions Facebook page. And if you happen to be listening after that date, well, that means just you need to hop over to Amazon and grab your copy of this beautiful book. Check out the other 3 in the series as well. And we are excited to hear what you think about that. Lastly today, everybody, remember, your words change the world when you're brave enough to share them. It's time to be brave. Thanks, you guys. See you next time.